Shan, Arora, passionate, animated, humorous.
Buildings are humanity's most abundant creation. We are a species that builds and builds and builds. And increasingly, buildings for humans are like water for fish. In the United States, we spend about 90% of our time indoors, and this figure was determined prior to COVID. Buildings have a tremendous impact in the United States. About 12% of our water and 71% of our electricity are consumed directly in buildings. If you take a look at our landfills, about 40% of what's in the landfill comes from the construction industry, and about 40% of the entire country's CO2 is attributable to buildings. We owe a huge debt of gratitude to the various green building standards that exist today. They have moved the market, building code, and conversation towards better buildings for the environment and occupants. But in a world facing environmental challenges and all of the equity impacts that come with them, is it enough to do better? For the Living Building Challenge, the answer is no. In a resource-constrained world, incremental change is not a viable option. Buildings have to be regenerative like flowers and give back more than they take. They have to be self-sufficient to the greatest extent possible, and they have to create a positive impact for people and planet. The Living Building Challenge is framed around 7 performance areas called petals. They are place, water, energy, health and happiness, materials, equity, and beauty. Projects have to meet all of the requirements, improve performance over 12 months of occupancy. Folks, that's why it's called a challenge. And this brings us to the Candida Building for Innovative Sustainable Design, which is at the Georgia Institute of Technology in Atlanta. It is a 37,000 square foot indoor, plus another 10,000 square foot outdoor, multidisciplinary, non-departmental education building. And friends, it's absolutely amazing. It's designed to harvest more rainwater each year than it uses, and it manages wastewater on site. It produces more solar electricity each year than it consumes. During the construction process, it diverted more waste from landfills than it sent to landfills, and that's just the tip of this building's regenerative features. But we don't have enough time to cover everything. So please visit our website and subscribe to our various social media channels to learn more. And now I'll highlight features that we believe exemplify the benefits that regenerative buildings have for their communities in which they're located. Let's begin with water, because water is life. The Candida building manages rainfall much as a forest would. During a normal rain event, 90% of the water remains on site. This reduces stormwater runoff that floods streets and negatively impacts downstream communities. That's an equity win. And it also reduces burden to infrastructure. That can save taxpayers money. The building is creative in reusing all types of water. HVAC condensate is used for on-site irrigation. Greywater collected from showers, sinks, and water fountains is pumped to a constructed wetland where plant and soil filter the greywater. In a conventional building, these types of water would go down the drain, and that's such a waste. Now let's talk about the icky stuff. Foam flush toilets use about a tablespoon of water to deposit your waste into bins in the basement. Basically, we brought an outhouse indoors. Natural systems break down your waste into compost. Our toilets do not connect to the sewer. Think about that. Moving on to energy. Here's how the building gets to net positive. It's built well. Air doesn't come in or leave unless we want it to. And there's lots of natural lighting. We have efficient systems like fans. And this gets the building to 72% more efficient than a conventional building. And then we add solar to get us to net positive. Materials is the most complicated petal. A main reason is because we're surrounded by harmful chemicals that the Living Building Challenge aims to eliminate. We vetted materials in the Candida building to the greatest extent possible against a red list of 22 worst in class chemicals. But shouldn't there be an easier way to rid our buildings of toxins? Packaged foods have a nutrition label so you know what you're consuming. Shouldn't you have something similar for building materials, considering we spend 90% of our time or more indoors? Thankfully, there are certifications that vet materials for toxicity. And the Declare label is like a nutrition label that lets you know whether your building products contain harmful materials. The materials petal also requires the incorporation of salvage material. We took materials from renovations, demolitions, and storm events. We milled them into stairs, tiles, and furniture for the building. This diverted perfectly reusable material from the landfills and provided local employment for workers who salvage these items. If we scale regenerative buildings, we could spark an industry that doesn't exist, what we call a salvage economy. Just imagine going to your local home improvement store and checking out their selection of repurposed materials that were diverted from the local landfill. If we created land, we can turn this into reality. Now you're probably thinking, but how much does all of this stuff cost compared to a conventional building? Well, keep in mind that this building's upfront cost includes 25 years of net positive energy, water for the life of the building, and no sewer fees. So a proper comparison has to consider lifetime operating costs, not just upfront costs. But here's another way I conceptualize cost. We say flush it down, throw it away, without thinking about where our waste goes. Therefore, shouldn't we also consider the societal costs of where our waste goes? Because it doesn't go to Mars. It stays on this planet, and we're all paying a price. Our future generations to come are still going to be paying the price. The Canida building shows that our bio-waste can be diverted from sewers and turned into compost. Instead of ending up in a landfill, construction waste can become the spark for a local industry that provides locally sourced building materials. You know, there's a saying, you can't unlearn what you learn from a living building project. You now have the knowledge to demand more of your policymakers, the contractors that construct your buildings, the companies that make your products. Demand a society that is less toxic for you and nature. We all deserve buildings that are built for people and planet.